It was one of those Tuesday nights in Tacoma where the rain wasn't really falling so much as just hanging in the air. A cold, wet mist that beaded on your jacket and made every street light look like a hazy orange moon that I'd put off going to the bank all week, and the deposit envelope for my freelance design work was a fat, awkward brick in my inner pocket. The only option at this hour was the night deposit box at the Tacoma Central Credit Union over on South 12th Street. I wasn't alone. Chloe was with me. Chloe, my neighbor from 2 floors up, who'd bummed a ride because her car was in the shop and she needed to hit the ATM. She was a dancer, or a former dancer, something like that, and she carried herself with a coiled grace that made even slouching in my passenger seat look intentional. The car smelled like her, vanilla and rain. "You're really paranoid about this, aren't you?" she said, her voice a low, amused hum. She was scrolling through her phone, the glow painting her face in shifting blues and whites. "It's a lot of cash," I said, my fingers tightening on the wheel. "It just feels exposed. It's a metal box in a wall. It'll be fine." She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, and I caught the clean line of her jaw, the smooth column of her neck that I'd been fighting this all evening, this low-grade buzz of attraction that felt both thrilling and completely inappropriate that we were friends, sort of neighbors who sometimes shared an elevator and now, apparently, errands. I pulled into the credit union's parking lot. It was one of those standalone buildings, all brick and tinted glass, closed and dark for the night. The drive-up ATMs were around the side, but the night deposit was a solitary, heavy-looking stainless steel drawer set into the wall near the main doors, under a dim, buzzing overhang light. The automated teller was a sleek, modern screen and slot set up next to it. "I'll just be a second," I said, killing the engine. "Take your time, I'm not getting out in this soup." She stretched, a languid, unconscious movement, and the hem of her thin sweater rode up, exposing a pale strip of skin above the waistband of her jeans that I looked away, feeling a hot prickle of guilt. My girlfriend Sarah was out of town visiting her sister. The thought of her should have been a bucket of cold water, but right now, in the close, intimate dark of the car with Chloe, it felt distant, abstract. I got out, the mist immediately clinging to my glasses. The lot was empty except for my car. The only sound was the distant, swishing hum of traffic on I-5. I fumbled the deposit envelope out of my pocket and walked over to the night deposit. The slot was a narrow, dark mouth that I pulled the handle, the heavy drawer sliding out with a solid clunk. I dropped the envelope in, pushed it shut, and heard the satisfying thump and were from deep inside the wall as it was swallowed. Standard procedure. Done. Then I remembered I needed a receipt for my records. I turned to the automated teller screen. It was a touch screen, currently dark. I waved a hand in front of the sensor, and it glowed to life, displaying the credit union logo and a prompt. I selected night deposit, and it asked for my account number. I typed it in, my fingers clumsy with the cold. The machine whirred and clicked. A receipt began to print from the slot below the screen. I reached for it, a little slip of thermal paper. I expected to see the date, time, and the deposit amount. It wasn't that. The receipt was longer than usual. At the top, it had the standard header, Tacoma Central Credit Union. The date and time were correct. My account number was there. But below that, where the transaction details should have been, was a single line of text, printed in the same bland font. It was a string of numbers. 47.2491, 122.4373. I stared at it. It made no sense. I looked back at the screen, but it had already gone dark, returning to its dormant state. I waved a hand in front of it again. Nothing. It was done with me. "What's taking so long?" Chloe's voice came from the car, slightly muffled by the closed window. "Nothing," I called back, my own voice sounding strange to me. I folded the receipt and shoved it into my jeans pocket. "Just a glitch." I got back in the car, the warmth a shock after the damp chill. "Get your proof?" she asked, putting her phone away. "Yeah," I said, starting the engine. "Something like that." I drove her to the ATM around the corner. She hopped out, her movements quick and efficient. I watched her walk, the way her jeans hugged the curve of her hips, the confident swing of her arms. My mind should have been on that, on the simple, primal pleasure of watching an attractive woman, but it was stuck on that string of numbers, burning a hole in my pocket. Back at our apartment building, we rode the elevator up in a comfortable silence. She got off on the 7th floor. Thanks for the ride, Mark, she said, flashing me a smile over her shoulder. It was a great smile, wide and genuine, and for a second, it almost chased the weirdness away. Anytime, Chloe. The elevator doors slid shut, and I was alone. The silence felt heavier now that I in my apartment. I tossed my keys on the counter and pulled the receipt out of my pocket. I smoothed it out on the cool granite. Asterisk 47.2491, -122.4373 started. I pulled out my laptop. It only took a second to type the numbers into a search engine. They were coordinates. GPS coordinates. The map that loaded made my skin go cold. It was a location in Point Defiance Park. Specifically, it looked like it was in a heavily wooded area, not far from the water. A place called the Narrows. I knew the park well. Sarah and I went for walks there on weekends. It was massive, over 700 acres of old-growth forest and shoreline. Why would a bank receipt give me coordinates in Point Defiance Park? I told myself it was a printer error. A corrupted data string. Some poor sap's geocaching coordinates had gotten mixed up in the system. It had to be. I crumpled the receipt and threw it in the kitchen trash, deciding to forget about it. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, the city's ambient glow painting the ceiling a dull orange. Every time I closed my eyes I saw the numbers. 47.2491, -122.4373. I thought about Chloe, the strip of skin above her jeans, the way she'd looked at me in the car. The two thoughts became tangled, the illicit thrill and the creeping dread braiding together into a single restless anxiety. The next morning the first thing I did was fish the receipt out of the trash. It was still there. The numbers clear and unambiguous. I took a picture of it with my phone just in case, then threw it away again. I tried to work, but my focus was shot. Around noon I decided I needed to clear my head. A walk. Some air. I found myself driving to Point Defiance Park. I told myself it was a coincidence, that I just liked the park. But as I navigated the winding 5-mile drive, my hands were tight on the wheel. I pulled over into a small, unofficial gravel pullout that my phone's map told me was the closest I could get to the coordinates by car. The trees were dense here, a wall of deep green and shadow. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and salt from the sound. I got out and started walking, my phone in my hand, the GPS dot on my Maps app inching closer to the pin I'd dropped for the coordinates. The ground was soft with fallen needles and leaves. It was quiet, the kind of deep quiet you only find away from roads. The pin on my map and the dot representing me merged. I was there. I looked around. It was just woods, thick stands of cedar and firs, salal bushes crowding the ground. Nothing. No marker, no sign, no mysterious object. Just forest. A wave of relief, so potent it felt like nausea, washed over me. Of course it was nothing. A glitch. I felt like an idiot for letting it get to me. I turned to leave, and my foot kicked something half buried in the soft loam. It was a small, flat stone, about the size of my palm. It was unnaturally smooth and clean, as if it had been recently placed there. Without really thinking, I bent down and picked it up. There was writing on it. Not carved, but painted in a precise, fine hand with what looked like black ink. It was my signature. Not a printed version of my name. My actual loopy, distinctive signature. The one I'd scrawled on the deposit slip last night before sealing the envelope. I dropped the stone as if it had shocked me. It landed face up in the moss, my own name staring back at me. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. This wasn't a glitch. This was... I didn't have a word for what this was. How? How could my signature be on a rock in the middle of the woods, at the exact coordinates a bank machine had spat out hours before I'd even come here? I backed away, my breath pluming in the cold air. I didn't stop until I was back at my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door unlocked. I drove home in a blind panic, my mind racing. I needed to talk to someone. But who? The police? They'd think I was insane. Officer, an ATM told me where to find my autograph on a rock. Sarah? She was already stressed with her family stuff. I couldn't dump this on her. My eyes landed on the building directory in the elevator. 7B. Chloe. It was a stupid idea. A reckless one. But the need for a human connection, for someone to just see this with me, was overwhelming. And maybe a selfish part of me whispered, it was a way to see her again. I knocked on her door. A moment later, it opened. She was in leggings and a tight tank top, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she'd just finished a workout that a fine sheen of sweat glistened on her collarbones. "Mark? Everything okay?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "No," I said, the word coming out in a rush. "Not really. Can I come in for a second?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then stepped back. "Sure." Her apartment was a mirror image of mine, but it felt entirely different. That it was warmer, lived in. There was a large mirror on one wall, a yoga mat rolled up in the corner. The air smelled like her, that vanilla scent mixed now with the honest smell of sweat. That it was intensely personal. "What's up?" she asked, crossing her arms over her chest. The movement pulled the fabric of her tank top tight, and I had to force my eyes to stay on her face. That I told her that I spilled the whole thing, from the weird receipt to the rock in the woods. That I showed her the picture on my phone. That I didn't show her the rock itself. I'd left it there, a decision that now felt both cowardly and wise. She listened, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. "That's really fucking weird, Mark," she said finally. She walked over to her kitchen island and picked up her own phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Let me see those coordinates again." I read them out. She typed them in. "Point Defiance," she murmured, confirming what I already knew. She looked up at me, her dark eyes serious. "And you're sure it was your signature? Like your signature?" "Positive. It's distinctive. I've had the same one since high school." "Okay," she said, putting her phone down. She came closer, and I could feel the heat coming off her body. "Okay. First, breathe. That you're freaking out." She put a hand on my arm. Her touch was electric. My fear and my attraction were now a single screaming feedback loop in my head. "It's probably a prank. A really, really elaborate and messed up prank." "How?" My voice was hoarse. "How could anyone do that?" "The bank machine printed the location before I found the rock. The timeline is impossible." "I don't know," she admitted, "but there has to be a logical explanation. There always is." Her hand was still on my arm. She was so close I could see the tiny flecks of gold in her brown eyes. My gaze dropped to her lips, then lower, to the pulse beating at the base of her throat. In the midst of this terror, all I could think about was what it would feel like to press my mouth right there. I took a step back, breaking the contact. The spell was broken. "Yet you're probably right. A prank." I didn't believe it for a second. "Do you want a drink?" she asked, her tone lighter now. "You look like you could use one." I should go. "I'm sorry for barging in like this." "Don't be," she said, and that smile was back, but it seemed different now, more knowing. "Anytime, remember?" I fled back to my apartment, my heart still hammering, but for entirely new and confusing reasons. I felt a profound sense of shame. My life was potentially spiraling into some inexplicable horror, and I was getting turned on by my neighbor. The two realities were colliding, making me feel dissociated, unreal. The next few days were a special kind of hell. I was jumpy, paranoid. Every creak in my apartment was an intrusion. Every wrong number phone call felt like a threat. I stopped going out after dark. I worked from home, the blinds drawn, and I started seeing him. The first time was 2 days after the park. I was at a coffee shop down the street, trying to force some normalcy back into my life. I was sitting by the window, staring at my laptop without seeing it, when I felt a presence. I looked up. A man was standing across the street, just under the awning of a closed bookstore. He was tall and thin, dressed in a dark, nondescript coat. He wasn't doing anything. Just standing there, perfectly still, looking directly at me. There was nothing overtly threatening about him. He was just a man. But the stillness was wrong. The directness of his gaze was wrong. It was as if he'd been placed there, a prop in my personal horror story. I looked down at my coffee, my heart starting to thud. When I looked back up, he was gone. I told myself it was my imagination, paranoia, but it happened again the next day. I was at the grocery store, staring blankly at a wall of cereal boxes, when I saw his reflection in the glass door of a freezer case. He was at the end of the aisle, just standing, watching me. I spun around. The aisle was empty. That's when the real fear set in. The kind that lives in your gut, cold and heavy. This wasn't just about a rock anymore. This was about me. I was being watched. I became obsessed with the coordinates. I researched Point Defiance Park, the Narrows, looking for any news, any crimes, any strange history associated with that specific spot that I found nothing that it was just a patch of woods. I thought about going back, the idea terrified me but the need to know, to understand, was a physical ache that I couldn't go alone that I thought of Chloe, the memory of her hand on my arm, the scent of her apartment, the way her body had looked in that tank top. The desire was a dangerous lure, a siren song pulling me toward the rocks that it was intertwined with the fear now. One seemed to fuel the other. I texted her. K. I know this is weird, but would you be willing to go back to that spot in the park with me? I need a second pair of eyes. Her reply came quickly. Sure. When? We went the next afternoon. The sun was out, dappling the forest floor that it should have felt peaceful, but the woods felt watchful that we hiked in, the silence between us thick with unspoken things. I was hyper-aware of her beside me, the sound of her breathing, the way her shoulder would occasionally brush against mine. She was wearing hiking boots and tight-fitting athletic pants that showed every curve of her legs and backside. I found my eyes constantly drawn to the powerful flex of her calf muscles as she navigated the uneven ground that it was a grotesque contrast. The beauty of her body and the dread of our destination that we reached the spot. The stone was gone that I scanned the ground frantically. Nothing that it had vanished. Are you sure this is the place? Chloe asked, her voice soft. Positive. I held up my phone, the GPS confirming it. It was right here. She knelt down, pushing aside the salal leaves, her fingers probing the soft earth. There's an impression, she said, like something was here. She looked up at me and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine unease in her eyes. You didn't move it? No, I dropped it right here and ran. She stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. So someone else took it. The implication hung in the air between us. Someone else knew that we searched the area for another 20 minutes, but found nothing. The woods offered no answers, only a deepening mystery. The walk back to the car was quiet, the earlier tension.